Good morning, everybody, and welcome to our weekly Technologies of the Future live webinar with Q&A. This morning it is, I think it's International Manners Day, and Bring Your Manners to Work Day. So I am going to enjoy a conversation of converging time and manners. I have a book to read this morning. I have a passage from The Good Ancestor. And I'm on a chapter and it's called Deep Time Humility, Humankind as an Eye Blink in Cosmic History. Our species at this moment in history is suffering from an acute crisis of perspective. Our time horizons are rapidly shrinking towards a narrow window of seconds, hours, and days, just when our survival depends on broadening our temporal vision. As we busily check our phones, existential threats ranging from bioterrorism to drone warfare may be lurking just over the horizon, while sea levels rise slowly and imperceptibly, threatening to engulf our coastal cities. How can we extend our minds and gain a visceral sense of a longer now, and that helps divert our civilizational path from the perils of short-termism? An essential starting point is to develop a sense of deep humility where we grasp the insignificance of our own transitory existence in relation to the vast time frame of cosmic history, freeing our minds to look both far into the past and beyond our lifetimes into a distant future. We must accept the reality that our personal stories from birth to death and all achievements and tragedies of human civilization will barely register in the annals of cosmological time. I'm just going to overlay that with a little bit further in the chapter. It talks about digital technology has an unmatched power to hijack our immediate attention, while we would never put up with the GPS that kept taking us to the wrong destination. This is exactly what happens with the technologies that direct us through informational space. We go online to do something useful, like book a doctor's appointment, and somehow get lured into watching a movie spoofs on YouTube, buying a new yoga mat, or checking our email again. Social media apps and websites are designed to achieve engagement goals. They aim to keep us clicking, scrolling, and swiping while showing us as many ads or pages as possible. Tech firms are in the business of immersing us in a digital present that distracts us from pursuing goals of our own choosing, and again, which long-term thinking can hardly compete. Sean Parker, founding president of Facebook, has admitted that hijacking our attention was an intentional objective of the company. The thought process was this. He said, how do we consume as much of your time and conscious attention as possible? And so I'm going to finish up there. I'll say thank you for the Good Ancestor for sharing these thoughts and kicking us off to the conversation this morning, where we shall talk about some manners and time. Welcome online. I believe Christina's with us, and Andrew and Brendan this morning.
Good morning, Lisa.
Good morning. Hi, I'm going to ask you, what's your one word opener this morning?
My one word opener is fresh.
Love it. Hey, Brendan.
Hello, how are you going? Renewal.
I love it. Andrew, without camera.
Without camera, it's getting there. There we go. Friday. That's my word.
That's a great word.
Thanks.
I love it. I can't even think of a word this morning. I'm discombobulated is a term that Christina likes to use.
That's a good one.
That goes with
I noticed I was reading the book and I'm like, you're rushing, you're chewing your words, you can't even read this morning. That's a sign of about 4 hours sleep, everyone. So welcome to this morning's entertainment.
Next week, we'll have a discussion on the importance of sleep.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love my Aura Ring, and I can always tell when I'm not doing so great when it hasn't been charged. So I can't even give you a score this morning. But,
is that conscious or subconscious?
It was a busy week this week, and 2 little girls' birthdays. Well, one is 7 today and one is 11 yesterday, my nieces. And so I've had, as opposed to being down in Sydney for the week, I went back to Newcastle, had a birthday party last night. I've come back down to Sydney. I've had some meetings in the middle of the night, and I'll go back to Newcastle this afternoon for another birthday party. So it's just that joint life of Sydney, Newcastle, and living in two different locations that are 2 hours apart. So that's my little story for this morning.
Nice avoidance of the question about the intention or the non-intention on the charging of the Oura-ring, only because you teach what you best need to learn, and guilty, Your Honour, sometimes as charged. So,
well, thank you. Let's kick us off into the conversation about manners. I'll thank you all for your comments. And how are we all feeling about what's mindset, technology impact? Let's talk about some manners in the workplace. Do you all work with robots? Are there any mindsets around talking to robots and using manners?
Oh, we've been nice when we talk to people. We don't call them robots, we call them people.
I'm sorry. That's
oh, you mean AI? Okay.
Robots are listening to AI. I mean, I've said robots again.
Yeah.
Actually, it's funny, in South Africa, robots are the traffic lights. So
and the windscreen wiper things.
Yeah, absolutely. Our washing machines, we've all got robots in our homes.
Yeah.
So so what are we calling them, Brendan? What's the...
Oh no, I thought you were talking about the other co-workers.
Isn't it interesting though? Because I just want to go, oh, you mean Alexa and Siri.
Yeah.
So we've actually personified them anyway.
Yeah.
And we have told the story before about young children actually speaking to, and I was talking to actually somebody from who was working around the whole Alexa issue. And she said they had lots of complaints from parents around how their children were talking to Alexa. And so they actually programmed Alexa to respond to thank yous and pleases as opposed to hard commands. And we have a colleague, an SU colleague, who said his young daughter was going, Alexa, open the door, Alexa, turn the light on, Alexa. And he said, and then she started talking to him in the same tone. And that's when he capped it. And he said, no, if you're going to ask Alexa something, you need to say, Alexa, please, whatever it was. But it's interesting that it's been a wider problem, and they've actually reprogrammed Alexa for those kind of issues.
Yeah, that was one of the things I raised on one of these talks a while ago, the fact that the Alexa was literally programmed to issue, have your commands and things like that. And it didn't quite understand the fact of thank you, right? Or please, or anything like that. It just ignored it. And it's the same thing for your car. I got a car thing that basically you want to do things, and you can't say please or thank you or anything else to it. It just doesn't understand it. It's got no concept. And so we need to actually start building those things in, because, yeah, literally people get used to treating those things and they start treating people the same. I think, manners is extremely important, because especially for children, but also for adults, right? Because manners, even though sometimes it's unnecessary, it reinforces that when you're talking to someone, how you want those people to interact back to you, right? And I think that's really powerful. And I think when you're designing artificial intelligence or machines, or what do you want to call them these days, that is built into those functionalities, right? Because it's becoming a lot normal. And as we interact with these things, we gain bad habits.
Yeah. I love the actual, you're thinking about the long-termism around it as well, short-term and long-term thinking. And there's almost like this pathway of psychology of actually, it's very hard to not reciprocate the emotion that you're getting. And so if we're going to have more intelligent robots, then, they're going to reciprocate what we've actually been giving them. And so, how do we give them names and program them with that kindness and love and intent that we would like them to treat us in the future when we're in the Matrix or wherever we may be? Like, what are we actually setting ourselves up for? And we've almost got an opportunity to create a long-term consciousness of the human race and the relationships between humans and robots going forward. Andrew, thoughts on psychology of it?
Yeah, I think manners are something that's incredibly important for us to maintain a social cohesion. We're a social animal by design. And so manners play a big role in people coming together. just to throw off to Star Trek, even the Klingons have their manners, and they're a purely logical race. So manners are I think are essential. Taking the fluffiness aside, it's a conduit to maintaining those groups of 150 plus people working together. What's really interesting is we've also got this little quirk that makes us anthropomorphize, or almost give human or conscious attributes to things. You know, children at the age of 2 or 3 talk about their little stuffed toys having feelings, right? And so there's an evolutionary part to that, and we kind of give that to robots too. You know, so I think it's something that's just inherently part of us, and it should be encouraged. More and as well, sorry, I might be on the back of your comment around human lifespan being just such a tiny blip in the cosmological age. Will robots eventually have their own consciousness, in which case we should be getting used to treating them in a dignified manner?
I was actually watching the Elon Musk TED Talk again this week, and he was talking about how we have so many digital ghosts these days, because everyone has a digital footprint that when they pass away, their digital ghost lives on into the ether. And so you can still, you know, potentially see Facebook pages or see anything digital online of people into the future. And so, you know, at what point, you know, does that become more of a consciousness, and you're able to upload your consciousness to the brain, or using Neuralink? Like, there's kind of all these future possibilities that are just so way out there now. It's kind of fun to be talking about it, but maybe we'll set some predictions now that it'll be in 10 years time, and in 10 years time we'll be like, oh, the AI robots will come and they'll just flash back a clip for us and go, you mentioned this back in 2022. So I kind of just have a huge consciousness of everything that's been recorded as well. So certainly using manners is important. But yeah, let's talk about a little bit of technology, so I don't waffle on too much about this. You know, does anyone think their vacuum robot? Does anyone have one of those automatic robots that gets around and vacuums the floor? And do you think it? And where do you draw the line?
I don't have one of those little black robot things that vacuum the floor. I have a little black dog that vacuums the floor. So yes, I hanker all the time. So I'm not very good at that question. But I do find myself, I have got myself into the habit of thanking Siri and asking Siri politely. But Andrew, to your point a bit earlier, or maybe it was you, Brendan, I feel a bit miffed sometimes when she doesn't say you're welcome. Like,
yeah.
How bizarre is that?
Yeah.
Now that goes into like, I suppose, like, if you think logically about how these technologies develop, is they weren't very good before, and so they're limited to the interactions and what's the words they can understand to make sure that they understand your requests much better, right? But so that's why they used to ignore things like please and thank you, because there's a technology limitation, right? We're past that, right? Technologies have, expanded exponentially. We can actually now pretty much almost within 100% accuracy get everything you say now. So the machines know. So now you can actually do some of those things that make those things a little bit more human. But I do remember reading somewhere where they deliberately made things like Siri and Google completely impersonal. I mean, Siri does some funny things too, but they made it impersonal because people were forming relationships with them, and they were worried that people were like going to treat them as like another partner, right? And so they used to have a lot more personal stuff, and they've stripped it all out. They made it pretty much a dumb corporate tool, but what they really need to do is do what they're doing. There's a Japanese thing called Gatebox, and Gatebox is like a little hologram girl. She's like one of those Japanese avatar things. She can send you text messages, and so you can put into your automation stuff so that when you get home, it'll turn the lights on for you. It'll send you text messages asking you how your day was and things like that. And so it's more of a AI friend as opposed to a tool. And you see, you've got a lot of power to do this with these, Amazon and Google, because they've got so much computing power and they've got a whole bunch of money. They can actually spend time personalizing things, but they don't. And I think that's missing out a big opportunity, but also we need to be careful about how we do that, because we've already seen instances of different machine learning algorithms that have actually started out insulting people, like Replica and things like that, where because they're using a language model that was fed from the internet, it's also taken up some of that toxic culture. And then it's very, very hard to actually control that. So I think we need to improve that technology and make it a little bit more fitting people, and then and adopting human values.
I love that. That's like the movie Her, I think,
Yeah.
explores the relationship of that. And I'm just wondering, because Soul Machines have a digital avatar where you can actually have a conversation with it, and I really love, because there's a little bar that they have in the settings, and you can actually see how the AI is reading your micro expressions. So for example, it might say you're looking very pessimistic. There's a bar of pessimistic and optimistic, and it's, like got these happy or sad, and it's got a number of different things that it's measuring, and then it's responding based on the input that it's actually getting. And so I really like that, and think that then, it's what insights is the AI getting, but then what actions is it recommending? And like you say, Brendan, what are we actually teaching it, and what do we want those insights and actions to be? So it might be, for example, that you're waking up and you're saying, what's the weather today? And then Siri replies, actually, you've got a bad attitude. Use your manners, please. Go and meditate first before you ask me again.
I love that. I love that.
It'd be good for young kids, right? You didn't say please, right?
Go and hug a tree.
Yeah.
The little check yourself before you hug yourself.
It reminds me of a study I read from Japan, where they gave elderly people in retirement homes that were living on their own. They gave them little robotic dogs, and they just had basic commands. It was a few years ago now, basic commands, but these dogs robots became companions. And when they went through, and it was actually a study in the relationship build between an elderly person and something robotic. And when they said, look, we need to wipe the dog's memory, we need to wipe the robot's memory, the elderly people were horrified, because they'd developed a relationship with the robot, and they'd developed a relationship where there were unique responses, and it was that they didn't end up wiping the hard drives and starting again. But it was a really interesting study in human reaction to what would it be like if your robot didn't remember anything that you had programmed it with.
So I've got a little bit of a question. How many questions do you each ask Siri or Alexa or your robot per day? How many questions do you think that you ask?
About 20. But usually got to do with time, setting reminders, and weather and stuff like that. I used to ask it a lot more when I first got it, because I was like, what can this thing do? But it's very, very quick that you're finding out that it can't do much at all, except outside of that. So you sort of get very excited, and then you're sort of like, oh, okay. Well, it doesn't understand, because the hated expression is like, sorry, I don't understand that expression I just heard. And it's like you're asking it the most mundane, normal things that you just want, and it gives you the wrong response. And I'm thinking, that was when I got this ages ago, I thought that was acceptable. And I thought, now it's like at least, 4 or 5 years since I've had this box, and it's still the same. It hasn't learned, right? So now I'm disappointed, because I'm thinking, with all the increases in machine intelligence, and they haven't even fixed the most mundane things. It's the same question. They still haven't answered it. And because these things all being data mined and stuff like that, you'd think that all these questions would be going into some central database, the mothership, and then someone would be looking at that and going, oh, these are the features we should be adding to these AIs. But they don't, because they're not interested in that. They're interested in getting your shopping habits and things like that.
Andrew and Christina, how many questions
I'd like to say 5 to 10, but depending if I'm cooking or not, because it can go up to about 20.
I gave up. I'm a bit like you, Brendan. I was asking it a little, probably too complex questions, and I was sick of having to go back and do it myself. But, you know, easy things like, you know, get me this person on the phone, or please, you know, what's the weather like outside? What's the fastest way to, just really basic questions. But it was interesting because my 92-year-old father would ask Siri to look things up for him all the time.
Yeah, I was actually just going, that's where I was moving towards, and I'm probably the same, about 10 to 20, which is crazy because I have 10 to 20 thoughts and questions per minute. So I just wonder, you know, what is the time frame that will change, and what is the impact that will have? And so, you know, just like, I think there was an ad that someone was asked, it was about, why is there a rabbit-proof fence or something like that? And to why is there, you know, it was a Google ad or something, and it was like, oh, to keep the rabbits out or something. I don't know. That was a bad example, but you know, it's like kids ask so many questions and they actually verbalize it, but they ask it to their parents. And I feel like as we get older, we probably start asking so many questions out loud because we might jump online and we might work it out. But imagine if you could just wander around and be like, what sort of birds are tweeting right now? I don't know if you can hear them, but hey, oh yeah, what's the population of those birds? And, you know, why are they hanging around with me right now? But, you know, the level of education and the impact that it'll have when we can ask immediate questions all the time. And, you know, I guess that does relay into work and manners. But I think, you know, what is the impact of being able to ask more questions, do you all think?
It's like Shazam for birds, really, isn't it?
Yeah.
But I think
oh, sorry, Kristen.
No, you're right. Go.
Does it inhibit our ability to think? And I'm not sure.
Andrew? Because
have you actually used a map recently without Google Maps?
But you actually have to think to know to ask the question. Is it just that is the curiosity still as intense, but the answer's easier to get, which means that you can then ask more questions and equally intense questions? I have this conversation in my head all the time.
Yeah,
but I think oh, sorry, you go.
No, go for it.
I was going to say, I think it's like a double-edged sword, right? You used to hear old people whinging about the young people not understanding because they have to do everything differently. They look at everything off their phones and stuff like that, and they think that there's somehow something lost because they have to used to do it a hard way. But so there is a little bit of that. It does make you a little bit lazier, right? But on the flip side, how many times would one of those old people back when they were you know, didn't have this technology and they didn't have access to books and transport or stuff like that because they were in the country, and they had a question and it just never got answered, right? And so they would have just thought about something and went, oh, I really want to know that. And that could have sparked off some other thought, but they didn't because they didn't have access to it. And those people have missed a whole bunch of opportunities. So I think if we design these things correctly, you can now ask these simple questions, which then can spark off higher order thinking of other things that you would have been blocked from doing because you didn't have that basic foundation answered. And so I think if we design our tools correctly and we make them accessible to everybody, just think about all the people, you know, it doesn't matter what age you are, everyone's got a thought, and some of those thoughts are just blocking because you didn't have access to someone to ask. And if you had a reliable, and this is the important thing, reliable source of information, then that answers that question. This allows your creativity to flourish in other areas.
Well, I am just realizing the time this morning, and I'm going to start to wrap us up a little bit early so I can actually make it to my next meeting in time. And I guess that's part of manners, isn't it? Is making sure that now that we're in person, we're going from one location to the next and being on time and staying in integrity, letting people know if we're going to be a minute late. I'm going to ask you for a vision of the future. So it's the year 2042. You've just woken up based on the convergence of time and manners and our conversation this morning. What would you like the world to look like? Brendan.
I think my dream is the fact that, again, go back to the Star Trek universe type idea where we don't want for anything in terms of basic needs. We can just be creative, and then instead of, because we're not competing for resources, we can treat everyone with respect and have, you know, time to listen to what people have to say and make them feel valued. And I think that would be going to the whole thing of solving a lot of conflicts we have at the moment. Or that competition, and I don't mean the healthy competition, I mean the unhealthy competition, all goes away and just becomes a contest of ideas as opposed to, you know, fighting over resources.
Andrew?
2030 something, we're finally starting to prove that some robots or silicon-based things may be self-aware, and so we have to be conscious of how we treat them. And particularly in the Marie Kondo universe, be grateful for them.
I like that, because I was heading down a similar path, Andrew. When will robots, AI, when will they cross over into having some kind of sentient awareness, and when do they become sentient beings? So I think for me, it doesn't matter where you come from. And if I go into Star Wars, again, it's almost like that respect everything. So we have this mutual respect. We can agree to disagree. And for me, that is what manners is. We can have a conversation. I don't know how friendly the philosophical debates were in ancient Greece, but the ideology around the philosophical debates really appeals to me. I think there was a bit of blind staggering and even maybe daggering going on behind the scenes. I'm not sure, but if we can develop that mutual respect, because none of us are fearful, and you know, ego is no longer a thing, and that's where the manners comes in, and that's where we can be respectful and agree to disagree. Utopia.
Nice.
I love it. I look forward to the year 2042, and I'd love to be able to wake up and ask 20 questions a minute. And even it might be, you know, how do I say good morning in Japanese? And then Siri might tell me, and then afterwards I'll respond with, did I pronounce that correctly? And I'll actually get really great hyper-personalized answers, and it'll be a companion for way more information and knowledge that'll empower myself, but it'll actually be available to everyone. And, you know, I love the idea of democratized technology. And so we can all ask better questions, and we can all show up as our better selves every single day with more information. And I guess, you know, like you say, Brendan, it's information can remove conflict, because we're all just having that little bit of lack of understanding at the moment. And I think that the robots will help us have better manners and better understanding of each other. And certainly in the year 2042 seems like a nice timeline to be able to achieve all of those things. And with that, we all live happily ever after. And I will say happy Friday. Thank you so much for joining us for the conversation this morning. Thank you, Christina. Thank you, Andrew. Thank you, Brendan. Thank you, Hayley, behind the scenes. And thank you, everyone who's live with us on LinkedIn. And my mum did miss that I'm not on Facebook Live anymore. So I will have to share this link over there as well. So thanks for everyone who's joining us on our online learning and social media, wherever you might be joining this conversation. Make sure to comment and continue it on so that we can all take better actions. Have a wonderful Friday.
Thank you.
Happy Friday, everyone.
Have a great day.
Bye.